Order and a very warm welcome to the first oral evidence session of our inquiry into the Get to Britain Working white paper, and particularly the reform in job centres. So an absolute pleasure to welcome our first panel of our first session here. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourself, starting with Professor Robertson.
Yes, hello. I'm Pete Robertson. I'm a Professor of Career Guidance at Edinburgh Napier University, where I teach Career Service Practice and Policy. I'm also currently the President of the Career Development Institute, which is the UK's professional body for career development practitioners.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Becci Newton. I'm Director of Employment Policy Research at the Institute for Employment Studies. We're an independent research organisation of some 50 years standing, looking into employment, unemployment and active labour market policy. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're all going to ask some questions, and I'm going to kick off if that's okay. So to what extent do you think the white paper's diagnosis of the problems with the job centre employment support is correct? And do you think that there's anything that might be missing or that could be added? Who wants to kick off with that?
I'll take a start. I mean, I think the diagnosis is broadly right, and it aligns with information we've published in our Commission on the Future of Employment Support. You know, we have 1.56 million people who are unemployed. We have 9.29 million people who are economically inactive. We need a service that can support people to both enter and sustain work, and to be able to do better at that. I mean, our analysis is showing actually the workless population is becoming more complex in respect of their needs. They're experiencing longer term worklessness. They need a service that can support and reach out and really make the difference, and sort of have a more varied and differentiated support model. I think the other side of it is being able to help people progress in work, to advance, to further their skill sets, and to become more productive for employers. And so it really needs a more holistic approach. I think the idea of moving to multi-format, multi-location, sort of from national service through to localised provision, taking support to where people are, is really important, and particularly for some of those who are furthest away from the labour market. We also need the engagement of employers to make this work, and to understand how best we can meet employers' needs through building that connection between the service and the vacancies that they have on offer. I suppose my one point would be the labour market, or labour market demand, has been falling. We're 110,000 vacancies below the level seen last year. It is slightly above where we were pre-pandemic, but it's a very challenging situation. So we need to build our skill set to work effectively with employers, as well as for employers to understand that job centres, a new employment and career service, will have a pool of talent who could help meet their needs.
Thank you. Professor Robertson.
Great. Yes, I think broadly the white paper's diagnosis is accurate, and I would agree it's very much in line with the Commission on the Future of Employment Support's report, which is an excellent piece of work, I'd just like to say. So very much agree with that, and it's appropriate to focus on growing the active working population as a route to economic growth, because other routes are probably more difficult. So it is very appropriate focus. There's issues of age, gender, health and geography are addressed in the white paper very well, and I agree that local responses are necessary, and having services that are well attuned to local labour markets and can have some discretion to respond to local labour market conditions is really important. Margate is not the same as central Glasgow. We need different responses. So I think that's great. I think where the white paper talks about precarity, I feel that some of those issues best addressed through employment law and employment protections, perhaps rather than through employment support services, can't necessarily fix all of those issues. And I think perhaps one area that we could maybe bring out is that the white paper talks about a youth guarantee, which is a standard response of European governments to high youth unemployment is to promise places in education and training, and so a youth guarantee is a good thing. I think to back that up, we need a clear delivery model for career services to young people who've left school. We currently have structures within school, but once people have left school, within England, it's somewhat patchy. So we need clarity on that and a promise of a service to those young people.
What about in terms of particular cohorts that you think that Jobcentres might be focusing on? Are there any particular groups that you think that Jobcentres need to focus on that they're not currently?
I would highlight, young people I've already mentioned, and we've seen a big growth in youth unemployment, to some extent associated with the growth in mental health conditions. So
why do you think they're not engaging at the moment?
Sorry?
Why do you think they're not engaging?
Oh, sorry. Well, another focus, I think, would be older workers. There was a fascinating study a few years ago which provided a pilot study by the Department for Business Innovation and Skills, and it provided a career review to people in mid-career, 50 plus essentially. Very successful project. We don't have a targeted service for older workers, but they're likely to have slightly different issues to those beginning or in mid-career in terms of health, finance, issues with dependents, grandchildren and so on, and managing health conditions. So a focused approach to the 50 plus group, I think, is valuable, as well as a focused approach to the new entrants to the labour market.
Okay. You mentioned in terms of the young people that there's no sort of post-education engagement or the delivery mechanism for doing that is different. How do you think that should change then?
I think we should promise to offer a service consistently throughout the UK to young people who have left school. A career service. Now, I'm not saying there's no provision. There is provision, but it's arranged somewhat differently in different parts of England as compared to the home nations where there's a consistent model.
Very helpful indeed. Thank you. Jo Baxter.
Morning. Thanks for attending this morning. Just following on from that then, what does the evidence show about the effectiveness of work coaches, and are there any changes you would like to see to that work coaching model?
So, I mean, the white paper identifies that actually satisfaction levels with work coaches are very high, and, that is the case. However, that's only the people who are currently meeting work coaches. So I think the gap in who is reached by the service needs to be traversed to make a new employment and careers service effective. While, we can argue that, and some people do, that the service as it currently stands is overweighted on benefits administration, and actually claimant needs are less at the forefront than sort of whether or not they're meeting quite generic and sometimes counterproductive conditions of claiming, such as a volume of applications per week, rather than thinking about a real quality and a well-matched set of applications to help labour market transitions. But actually, work coaches are really good at delivering employability support. They are really effective at building relationships. I've evaluated programmes over the years. For example, in the 2015 ERSA reform evaluation, there we could see how effective that work-coach relationship could be, where there can be a rapport built, a shared belief between claimant and work coach that they will be able to achieve work and make that transition and work together towards it. Those people with health conditions, those older people, intersectional issues affecting their lives will experience setbacks, but that work coach continuity is a really important factor, and actually throughout the active labour market literature you will find continuity of advisory support a very important factor. So they can be very effective. I think they're great at job seeking support, helping people understand how to do that. If you're older, the ways of finding work are different from when you were younger, so you can get all that impact from a work coach. I think where we will need to consider in a new service the differentiation is the difference that a careers advisor can make within that. So our work coaches are very good, to use a label, in terms of helping people to get, the job getting. So if you've got a reasonable goal and it seems well matched to your local labour market or the labour market that is accessible to you, then the work coach can really help facilitate around that transition for you. However, if you are a career changer, you've left a job, and actually the labour market is changing, we know employer demands are changing, we've got growth and decline occupations, you don't understand the opportunities available to you. You may not understand how your skills fit in this changed world. You really need to be working with somebody to help you identify your strengths and how that does match sort of to occupation more generally, to then sort of more readily go back to a employability support from a work coach to then think about, well, what's the opportunity here to you locally and how can we best get you across to that. Some effective stuff we saw in programmes such as the health-led trials, which embeds individual placement support, and you will see this in primary care and community care settings, and it's sort of part of the package, but the brokerage with employers to find out where the vacancies are, to support job carving, to support job design and job matching. And I think that's an area where we would want really good coordination, but also to push hard to achieve those transitions, to push towards that 80% target.
Well, thank you for that, and I think that goes to the earlier point that your colleague made about people needing different things in terms of that employment support. Somebody who's transitioning from one job, who's perhaps mid-50s, is going to have very different needs to somebody who's just entering the workforce for the first time. Conscious that the DWP has 16,000 work coaches who have a caseload sometimes in excess of 100 claimants per work coach. Do you think the department has enough work coaches to get that sort of relationship that you just outlined to really develop the knowledge of those individual claimants, to get them the support and point them in the directions that they might need?
I think it's a really interesting point, and of course the workforce isn't simply the work coaches working within Jobcentres and DWP. We also have employment advisors in employment support organisations who are very specialised. So I think that continued collaboration is really important. There's a wealth of knowledge in those providers and through programmes such as Restart around how to help longer-term unemployed people. And as I described, people who are workless are facing quite lengthy periods of worklessness, so then their needs are complex. So we need to capitalise on the support there. I think we do need to change the opportunities work coaches have to work with their caseloads. It is too high. So if we're bringing in staffing from the careers service to join together with work coaches in delivery, we need to have careful triaging to know when a case can be handed over to a careers service when the need is there. So somebody needs support around decision making, how to manage careers and so forth. We also might want to think about, well, who needs more intensive support, more specialised support in job seeking to move closer, and that might be where employment support organisations come in. But work coaches play a really important role in that first phase of job seeking, that rapid activation period, it'd be great if we can help them focus on the claimant within that, to help that process, rather than to be overly focused on compliance with benefits conditionality, which can be counterproductive, as I described. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you so much. John Mill.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. As you know, the government plans to introduce a new jobs and careers service. So what do you think the shortcomings of the current job centre offering have been, and what do you think might be a more effective approach? Yes, if you want to start.
I'm happy to start.
Yeah.
I think it is the sense of this is for claimants, this is to show you've complied with the conditions to receive your welfare benefit. I think over many research studies that I've done and evaluations for the department, we encounter people who don't find the job centre a very approachable place. There's security on the door. You couldn't bring your children if you weren't able to get care. The coaches have to focus on, have you applied for those 20 jobs this week? Are you able to demonstrate that you've looked for work for 35 hours a week? And there isn't sufficient focus on, actually, let's help surface those strengths. Let's help you understand what's available in the local labour market. That big volume of applications is a problem to employers engaging with the service, because rather than getting high quality applications, they just get a huge volume to sift from people who aren't necessarily motivated for the work. Whereas if we could have a greater focus on people heading towards well-matched vacancies that they're motivated to take an interest in, I think we can get more engagement from employers and achieve a better quality of service all round, really having that focus on employment and careers rather than benefits administration. It will be there. I think you can trust your work coaches to know and report if they don't feel somebody is engaging in a search. Sometimes rigid rules around, like if you miss a claim and we can't actually understand the reasons why you might have missed your appointment, you've just missed it and we're going to sanction you, are unhelpful, and it's unhelpful to push people towards poverty. And you want them to come to support. I mean, that's what we want from a service. So it's rights and responsibilities. I would never argue against that. But we want a service to be approachable. And I think one of the ambitions, which I truly believe in, is this should be helping people who are in work to advance in their careers, to be able to push further, and that would deliver on economic prosperity, but also health and well-being and social outcomes for individuals. So again, to foreground the benefits element and not really centre on the employment and careers services that are offered, kind of belies what we could be offering and sort of underplays what we could do.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd agree with that. I think it's worth bearing in mind that employment support services in a number of English-speaking countries have had a doctrine of work first. So get people into a job as quickly as possible. If they're attached to the labour market, they'll find another job, it'll all work out. So there's been a tendency in a number of countries, including the UK, to push people into jobs as quickly as possible. And it's a short-termist view. It tends to it changes the relationship with the person because they become an object of policy rather than a human with their own needs and motivations. So we tend to treat people as objects, and the evidence suggests it hasn't really worked that well across a number of countries. And this link to welfare conditionality enhances the problem. Sanctioning people's problematic because many adults are unemployed for important reasons or multiple reasons. So sanctioning them is not necessarily effective because they can't necessarily leave the house. If they have a disabled child, they must be there for. Many barriers that people face: lack of skills, qualifications, confidence, lack of transport in some rural areas. So there are substantive barriers to work, and I'd like us to see move away from a work-first doctrine towards a career-first doctrine, where we look at people holistically, we look at their strengths and weaknesses, we think long-term, help them plan long-term and set long-term goals for themselves. And very often that might mean going through education and training and skills development before entering the workforce. So I'd like to see a culture change and a shift in doctrine, if possible.
Yes, well, it leads very much into my next question, which was, Professor Robertson, you have written about a considerable cultural gulf between job centres and career services. Mm-hmm. What do you think the implications are for the ability or likely success for combining job centres and career services, given that where they're starting from?
Yeah, I think it's easy to conflate career services and employment services because superficially they sound very similar, or to stick a careers label on an employment support service and think it's a careers service. There are differences. Careers services are professional services. They're staffed by people with graduate or postgraduate level training. They're using assessment skills, counselling skills, information skills, drawing on a substantive information base is necessary to underpin that. And they're also providing education as well. So it's a kind of a hybrid, high-level, advanced-level skills involved. Like health professionals, they have professional ethics. They're putting the person in front of them first. And they can design solutions to new problems or innovative solutions to a specific client group. And so all of this leads to a different sort of relationship with the service user from that you might get in an employment support service where the focus is very often on job-seeking support. So they are different, and I think I have seen some evidence from other countries suggesting that where career services are embedded within public employment services, the culture can undermine that the character of those careers services and weaken their value. So I think it's important to have a clear separation and find some way, either institutionally or culturally within the organisation, of preserving the benefits that careers services can bring.
Yes, and I think that's really getting to the heart of it. That there is a risk by combining these services that we actually we want to upgrade the work element and not reduce the career element, but we're in danger of doing the exact reverse. Do you think, Becci, that it is achievable, or likely to come out on the right side of history, as it were?
I mean, I firmly believe there needs to be effort put into culture change within the services if we do want to have true integration and to build better understanding on both sides of the benefits of the work each does. While we've had kind of co-location and the opportunity for a referral pathway to National Career Service over many years, work coaches themselves will refer on the basis of it's to get your CV done. So their vision, or at least how they're talking to claimants about what a career service might offer, is quite limited. And how far that reflects their understanding of actually the value of speaking with a careers professional to really sort of gain those kind of higher level inputs that you get around careers management, around careers thinking, around your skill sets, building that confidence, because many of the people coming through are at a really low ebb. People who are furthest away from the labour market can't move into these rapid activation phases. They do work, the sense of work first can work for some people, but it's not right for everybody, and some people need something more holistic, which might lead you in a different path, and some people really need that opportunity to think and refocus. But I think unless you can create the culture change and the valuing of both elements, you could lose the baby with the bathwater. And I think there is something, I've observed over the years that work coaches do like to feel they're kind of in charge of the case, and they may need to sort of acquire more trust of what can happen with another advisor. So while they go more to the background and let somebody be in the lead, to trust that the other partner can lead on that, and they can just, like the work coach can continue to have some engagement, but actually that support can be led well by their careers service to help that person sort of be more ready to then enter employment.
Yeah. Yes, in fact, in my constituency of Horsham, I sat in on a career session recently, and it was impressive because there was a sort of private sector vibe, or it felt not a sort of institutional box ticking exercise. It felt like they were really trying, as they would for any paying candidate. So we'd be afraid to lose that. Obviously, a big part of this, the government's going to. How should they measure this? Because that targets affect the way institutions behave. So what would constitute success, and how should they measure it?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, but it's a really important one. I think that there has been a tendency sometimes in the employment support where it's contracted out to have perverse incentives, targeting that's too severe, which encourages providers or forces providers to cream off those who are closest to the labour market and support them, or to engage excessively in surveillance and monitoring behaviour rather than helping behaviour. So it's important to be careful about setting criteria. I would make a case for saying that there's no single measures and no simplistic measures. We've had this in schools recently, haven't we, with Ofsted? You can't just, you're a good school, you're a bad school. Well, no, let's have a more nuanced approach. I would argue for that in this context as well. We have seen a shift over time in moving from have you got someone a job to have you got a job that they've kept for 3 months and then to 6 months and so on. We've seen some attempts to change success criteria in terms of retention, which is progress. But I think some of what this service could do is getting people into skills development. So we should be counting outcomes. If somebody's accessed volunteering or a FE course, a training program, we could broaden out those sorts of measures, and possibly use some attitudinal measures as well. Boosting someone's confidence, making them more proactive, makes a big difference in their life, not just in their employment. Some charities get very frustrated that they know they're doing good work with people, but it doesn't count for their outcome measures, it doesn't count for their funding. They've changed someone's life, doesn't count, because they haven't got a job. So I think a broader range of measures is useful. The other thing I would argue for introducing is the user's perspective and the user's voice. So again, there's been this tendency to see people as objects on the receiving end of policy, but why don't we have user satisfaction as an important outcome measure? Why don't we have users involved in the design and governance of the service? And which is the kind of thing you get in mental health services. It's not completely radical suggestion. So I think that's something we should look at.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Frank McNally.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to you both. Can I ask you about the role of devolved governments and administrations? I mean, in Scotland we have a situation where skills and careers are devolved to the Scottish Government. We see levels of devolution in Wales and Northern Ireland, and the White Paper recognises that there will have to be different arrangements across devolved administrations, but there is limited detail at this stage about how that will work in practice. So how do you see the proposals operating differently across the devolved nations, and do you envisage that there could be implications for the impact of the reforms or the experience of those accessing the service?
Right. Yeah. Okay, well, I'm based in Scotland, so this is dear to my heart. I think first of all, in Northern Ireland, you've got Department of the Communities delivering, so it's different government departmental structure. It's in some ways, some of the issues we're talking about today are not a problem there because their career services have been civil servants working closely with the equivalent to Jobcentres for many years. So it's a closer relationship, and their career services are co-located in their jobs and benefits offices. So there's that. In Scotland, we have Skills Development Scotland is the National Careers Service, and they've been working with Jobcentre Plus for years, co-locating now, beginning to co-locate, delivering on their premises. In Scotland, we've also got to some extent, devolution of employment, like the subcontracted employment support services have been devolved, so there's the no one left behind provision. And in Wales, there's Working Wales is a programme delivered by Careers Wales for adults, which is, again, refers to and back from the job centre, delivers some services within the job centre, and like Scotland, they do some rapid response to redundancies if there's a factory closure or something like that. So what you've got across the home nations is in each of them have got a strong careers service, and because of that, a strong independent careers service that's able to maintain its character as a careers service while delivering on job centre or equivalent premises. So that's an interesting model. It does suggest that it's possible to have think of job centres as a delivery platform for other services coming in. I think that's interesting, because job centres are reaching a part of the population that most needs services, whether that's public health or financial advice or whatever. I think thinking about them as a really good platform for reaching the people of working age who most need support to prevent them having major problems down the line, I think that's a useful thing to think of. If you're interested, have a look at the Working Wales website. It shows how the services can be sort of humanised nicely. The only other thing I would say is in the Commission for the Future of Employment Support report, well, perhaps I should leave this to you, but there's a suggestion of greater devolution of employment support services. I can't see any reason why not to do that, because they can integrate and respond to local labour markets more easily. I think there's a case maybe for reserving powers over benefits in employment law, because you want a level playing field perhaps. But for employment support, I can't see why we wouldn't want to give people that regional control.
Yeah, I agree with that, absolutely. And I think I'd just point to the different maturities of devolution within the different nations, and you want to embrace the best of what's been achieved, but it does show that we can have that differentiation and respond to the needs of different contexts quite well, whilst having some consistency at the same time. The local labour market partnerships are worth thinking about in Northern Ireland, and Northern Ireland has narrowed the employment gap, so we wouldn't want to lose that. I was also going to think about the no one left behind in Scotland, and there's also some great work in Wales, Working Wales, but also around a framework for young people's outcomes and integrated support there. So I think we need to learn from the best in the nations, whilst also appreciating that they are at different stages of devolution, and so the kind of UK-wide offer will need to be differentiated to respond to those different Devo contexts.
Yeah, no, well, listen, I appreciate that, and I suppose that just leads on nicely to my second question, which is around some of the lessons that can be learned from the practices that have been put in place by devolved administrations. Both, so I suppose, could you maybe outline some of those examples of areas that are, working in a very good way, or areas that are maybe causing concern that the department could perhaps learn from as they sort of go through this journey?
Okay, well, one example, there's similar things happen in Wales, but in Scotland we have a service called PACE, Partnership action for continuing employment, which is about trying to prevent people becoming unemployed when there's a redundancy event. And it's a multi-agency working with the Careers Service, Skills Development Scotland taking a lead, but Jobcentre, Chambers of Commerce, range of agencies involved, Citizens Advice, they come together to provide rapid response. And I think that's interesting, because I think when people think about those who are unemployed, it's a bit like a bath. You've got the plug where water goes. There's flows and stocks, okay? The plug is people leaving unemployment. The focus is always on that end, but you also want to stop people coming in the other end from the tap. So reducing unemployment also means stopping people entering that state by intervening promptly. And that can save a lot of resources down the line. So PACE is an example of an attempt to do that. And of course it's politically very acceptable, because governments can be seen to be responding rapidly to a local concern.
I'd have to go away and put something together in writing, if that would be okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Nice, Chair.
Thank you. Of course, you're very welcome to submit some evidence following on from that. And the last question to this panel is Jo Baxter.
Thank you. So we've talked a little bit about balancing employment assistance and benefits monitoring, if you like. Are there any lessons that we can learn from other countries in terms of how they've introduced a more holistic welfare to work approach? I'm thinking maybe Australia, Germany. Just wondering if you had any specific knowledge or examples that you could share with us on that.
You want to?
I can say a few things. I don't have great expertise in this field. My understanding with Australia is they have been quite involved in work first sort of approaches. And they have been very innovative as well. So I'm not sure they're necessarily the best model to look to. There's a number of countries in Northern Europe, Netherlands, Germany, and Finland that have use their public employment service, their job centre equivalent, as a major delivery point for careers services. And where countries are doing that, they're tending to prioritise young people. But lots of countries, like us, are having trouble with numbers of qualified staff, not having sufficient qualified staff in our careers and employment support services. And a lot of countries are tending to focus on the skills and labour supply issues. Economic drivers are paramount in the design of those services. Actually, just to digress slightly, as it's come into my mind, this issue around qualified staff, the Department for Education have been talking about training 1,000 careers advisors. And there's a manifesto promise, or a promise before the election, they're exploring the practicalities of doing that. One thing to flag up about that is they're talking about funding training, but haven't got in mind jobs for those people to go on to. So I think there's a potential need for DFE and DWP to be in dialogue about, if that investment's going to happen, how are we going to make sure those people actually end up in delivery jobs? Yeah. Because I don't think that's yet a pathway to that has yet been found.
In the international space, I mean, things that I'd explored in the past are kind of the Nordic flexicurity models that try and sort of provide some resilience between periods of being in work and out of work, and do have those programs of upskilling, but different tax context, obviously, different investment context. I'd agree that Australia has been more work first. We have looked into characteristics of different international models, sort of comparing work in UK, Australia and the US. And we found a stronger predominance in good work employment support models for occupational pathway kind of support and training support and placement in the US, interestingly. This resonates most strongly with our sector-based work academies type approach, but kind of doing a bit of screening, making sure you've got somebody motivated to enter a particular sector, a particular occupation, and then building the skill set, getting a placement to get that transition. And then the other model really is a bit more advisor-led with wider support, so kind of focused again on understanding the individual and then brokering sort of a holistic support relationships around them that can then help them move themselves into employment. But a lot of this, the kind of general lessons that we were able to derive were you need the individual to have that motivation, so working on understanding where they're at and then helping move that to be aligned with what's available in the labour market is important. We do need that dual customer notion, that it's not just individuals who are claimants or seeking employment and career support, it's actually employers too. We need to understand both sides. Need strong partnerships. I know that's in the white paper. I think that's really important. Skills and capabilities of the advisor are really important too. And then I think the bit we haven't talked about yet is how important follow-up support is. And as when we were talking about measures of success, you know, we are thinking about often sustained ability to sustain work. I think we should be sustaining work rather than sustaining a particular job. It's very unlikely we're going to have a career for life. It should be work that is appropriate to the individual because that makes it more likely that they can sustain. But being able to sort of stay with them, particularly for a first phase of employment entry, re-entry, can help overcome some of the obstacles they might experience in that first phase of work. I've seen some wonderful examples of how, you know, advisors have been able to intervene to build employers' understandings of issues that a young person has been encountering, and that's really switched around the relationship and built support. The employer really willing to then build support for that young person to help them stay in work. So being able to be there to support, to broker where needed. Not everybody wants an advisor brokering in their employer relationship, but some really do appreciate it, and I think that's a bit of the support kind of patchwork that we didn't discuss, but it's an important part.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you so much. That concludes our questions to this panel, so thank you very much, and if we could move on to our second panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very warm welcome to our second panel for this oral evidence session for the Reforming Jobcentres inquiry. Perhaps we could start with some introductions. Could I start with Jane?
Good morning all. I'm Jane Gratton. I'm Deputy Director of Policy at the British Chambers of Commerce. Across the UK, there are 51 Chambers of Commerce with place-based organisations representing over 50,000 businesses of all sizes and all sectors, but predominantly small and medium-sized companies.
Good morning everyone, I'm Saira Hussain, Employment Policy Chair at the Federation of Small Businesses. I'm also a small business owner, lead a female-led architectural practice in Burnley, my hometown, and Manchester.
Fantastic. David Pinto-Dzieciński.
Thank you so much, Chair, and Jane and Sarah, thank you so much for coming in. We heard earlier about kind of, so to speak, the academic take on the strengths and areas of potential improvement for Jobcentre Plus. But obviously, you know, some of the key actors in this are employers. You know, ultimately it is a brokerage service that's trying to help you find the right employees and help them move in to labour market attachment. And I suppose I wanted to just start with a kind of broad question, maybe a kind of tiny bit leading, because obviously your engagement is critical to JC Plus's success. I'm very conscious, I think the starting point is only 1 in 6 employers use JC Plus. Why do you think that is? What do you think Jobcentres Plus gets right for you as an employer and for different types of sorry, so 2 questions. So 3 questions. 1, why is that? 2, what does it get right? 3, how does it get right for different types of employer? And 4, what do you think the challenges are it faces?
What's the second? The 4th question, sorry.
What are the challenges?
Challenges. Okay, I'm quite happy to start. Yes, so there is very low awareness and engagement amongst our members. Our latest research showed only 14% of members had engaged with job centres in the last 12 months. They're predominantly the larger firms who do engage, and only 8% of businesses with less than 10 employees had engaged. And they tend to engage either at the jobs fairs that job centres hold or at their own business premises. Why do so few engage? I think, unfortunately, where they have engaged, they may have not had the optimum experience. So what businesses are looking for is an efficient, reliable, predictable service, and sometimes they don't always get that. The feedback we've had is, when they've invested time in the process, candidates might not attend the interviews that are offered. They might not turn up for the first shift, or they might not return for a second shift, or that when, even if they were employed for a day or 2 or even a week or so, they very quickly leave that job, the sense of lack of preparedness. So I think from an employer perspective, if you are, as an SME, time poor, resource poor, needing an efficient service, there can be a reluctance to re-engage if you've had a difficult or unsatisfactory experience at the first time. There is a perception sometimes also of a box-ticking approach where, the candidate is turning up but has no real intention of taking the job, and a sort of lack of a feeling that the job centre don't always fully understand what the needs of employers are. So framed against that, second part of the question, what do they get right? Where there is, I think, a good relationship with an employer, where time has been taken to understand, what the employer needs, what time the employer has, what the job will entail, what attributes, what behaviours, what skills the individual will need. Where the time is taken to do that and build that solid relationship, then I think it works very well. And some businesses say to us, we've got a good relationship and it's great. I think when it feels like there's a huge cohort of people that employers are interviewing or asked to interview, and then they don't actually end up offering a job to anyone, then it can feel more disappointing.
I think to follow on from Jane's, what she said is, I'm a small business and an employer, so I've used the job centre in the past. We've sort of set out our criteria to the job centre, and we've been sent applicants, and the applicants that we've found that have come to us haven't matched the job role. And we've had applicants that are really unmotivated. Many don't turn up. The ones that do turn up, I remember once having someone say that we've only come here to show the job centre that we're making an active effort to look for a job. And also we've struggled with then giving feedback to the job centre. We felt like they don't really want to hear it. And there's no follow-up from the job centre. We've sent you 10 applicants. Were any of them employed? And if not, why not? None of that happened. So I think that really put us off the job centre as a small business employer. We haven't had any large amounts of feedback from the FSB members who have experience working with job centres well. Occasionally we'll have members talk about a positive experience with an individual at the job centre rather than the job centre as a whole.
Thank you. I mean, and thank you both for that. It sounds like, if I kind of step back from what you're saying, it sounds like the experience with the Job Centre fundamentally is driven by the degree to which you find in individuals who are much more, there was this old term, demand-led, start from employers' requirements and actively work back and think about that match. Are there, but that's very case by case, and are there any, from your members, any kind of good examples of best practice that they have flagged up that you could share with the committee?
I think that there are some good examples. I was talking to one of our chambers just yesterday who was saying, actually I think it was in Cambridgeshire, where they were talking really positively about a local hub, job centre hub that had set up, where it was bringing the service out of a job centre premises into a more sort of neutral environment where people were connecting with, job seekers were connecting with employers, with training, with employment advice in one little hub. And they were saying that, that sort of innovative approach where everybody's focused on, looking at the needs of the individual, but also the needs of the employer, seeing the employer as a customer as well as the individual. There's some really are some positive experiences, but it's not a universal, it's not consistently positive.
I think I've already mentioned it, where positive experiences have been based on individuals at the job centre rather than job centre as a whole, but no sort of personal experience at FSB members where they've come back and said job centre as a whole has been a really positive experience.
Thank you. And just one question before I then cede the floor. I mean, I think that's a really clear message about the importance of having staff who understand the labour market, who are, it sounds like, who are connected to understand requirements and then do follow-up. I suppose the other thing that struck me, Jane, from what you said was about the gulf between large employers who are trying to often do scale recruitments and so will try to use a scale service, and small employers where you said only 8% of your SME members are engaging with JC+. Could you say more about that? I'd love to hear from both of you about that, because clearly so many of the firms in our economy are SMEs.
Yes.
About what we need to do, about what the specific issues are for SMEs.
I think it goes back to the awareness, so awareness of the service that job centres can offer. They're not naturally looking there in the first instance. They might be, they'll advertise a job on their website, they'll go to word of mouth. Is there anybody here who, do you have anyone else who might, in your friendship group or family, who might want to come and work? And they might go to the sort of recruitment and job posting boards. They are time poor, resource poor. They don't have HR services at hand, they don't have learning and development resources in hand like the larger firms. So they're doing multiple jobs. And balancing lots of priorities. So as I said earlier, they need that sort of efficient service. So the larger firms would tend to, my understanding is the larger firms would tend to have a sort of national contact, and they would, they would have more of a sort of tailored service to what they need if they're recruiting in numbers at a sort of national level. Smaller employers will want that local, they'll want to build trust in someone at the local level. They might not be recruiting all of the time. They might only have occasional jobs, but they want to be able to build up that trust. So I think one of the solutions is for job centres to learn how to network and engage with more employers. And, they can use local intermediaries, they can use chambers of commerce, because this is what we do. This is our day job, is to engage employers, inform employers, and other local organisations who convene employers, provide information signposts. So, if we can have a better connection between job centres and employer organisations to get that information out, I think that would be really helpful. But critically, it is about understanding that local labour market, who the employers are, what jobs they're creating, where the opportunities are, and making sure that candidates are work ready when they come for interview, that they are motivated, that they are work ready, that they understand the opportunities in that organisation. And because employers telling us, that with 4 in 5 employers struggling to recruit at the moment, so they want to reach out to more diverse talent pools. They've told us that. They are willing to, they're offering flexible working, You know, they don't know how to do job design and job carve-out that we were hearing earlier on. They don't know, most of them won't understand what that means and how to do that and the benefits of that. But with support, they are willing to do that. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and our members have responded very positively to the white paper and to what it's saying. There is opportunity there. We just need to make it work.
Just one quick follow-up question before I come to you, Saira. And what this and is there a brand issue as well? Because I know people have talked earlier about preparedness, soft skills, the sense, because obviously everyone's aware that Jobcentre Plus exists, so in that sense there's quite high awareness. Yeah. Is there kind of, as you say, but then they don't use it, and some of that's just the thing closest to hand is job boards, etc. Is there also a brand issue there with the thought that they're worried about the quality and kind of preparedness of applicants as well, or is that something we also need to look at?
Yeah, I think it is about is the candidate right for my role, and a business will want to make sure that the skills of the candidates coming forward match, and they will look for potential. It's important to say that, it isn't always about somebody being a perfect fit for the role. Mm-hmm. Businesses will look for potential and where they can help shape and train. They're very, very positive about that. But you need to have the fundamentals in place when that candidate comes to the interview, and that motivation and the right behaviours. So I think in terms of brand, many employers might look at the job centre as more of a benefit processing organisation rather than a recruitment service for themselves. So maybe there is more of awareness process to go through.
I think in terms of branding, just to follow on from what Jane said, as an employer, I think just it's a really negative perception of what you get from the job centre. I think we see more people that are at the job centre as people that sign on rather than people that are job seekers. And I think that perception needs to change. And also the approach that we get from the people that work at the job centre, we feel as though small business are less of a priority than big businesses. And we also feel like job centre is not relevant to us. I think the job centre need to understand that small businesses might recruit one person every year rather than 10 people that a large business might recruit every year. But that doesn't mean that we're less of a priority. So I think maybe a scheme or something designed around infrequent use employers rather than big businesses that you might use every other day.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jill German.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. It's already been incredibly helpful to hear a business take on this work. So the Get Britain Working White Paper talks about how there's currently insufficient adjustment for local market trends and local labour markets, and we have touched on this a little. So I wondered if what you thought of how job centre staff currently understand the local labour market and the needs of local businesses. So you mentioned that your organisation is very much place-based, and I know that having a place-based approach is something that the government are keen on moving towards. So I suppose my question is on current understanding at job centre level, and then going on to how we can make that better if it's not all it could be.
Yeah, I think there is some understanding. I think there's a recognition that there needs to be more understanding, and we probably have a long way to go, I think, is how I would sum that up. I mean, the Chambers are running 32 of the local skills improvement plans and across England, and these have brought together in the first few months around 65,000 engaged businesses who are struggling to recruit and who want to reach out to different pools of talent and get support on how to access training. And we know that DWP are beginning to engage with that forum. I think that offers a really fantastic source of data, local data, on where the opportunities are, where the skills gaps are. And it also offers that pool of engaged, motivated employers as well. So I think going forward, use of LSIPs will become increasingly important. But Chambers and other local business organisations understand that local labour market, and we're very, more than happy to work with colleagues across the job centres to help share that information But I think that is critical, really. That understanding will help shape the local services and make sure people are ready for those opportunities.
You want to come in on that, Saira?
Just really briefly, I think, like for us in the architectural sector, we think maybe that job centres could liaise with local universities to bring us the candidates, because when we put an architectural job out, we rarely get a response, but we feel as though when we speak to the local universities, there are plenty of candidates that could be sent our way.
So do you feel something like a mapping exercise maybe of what is in that local area would be helpful for local organisations to undertake? So within the job centre, or perhaps working with external partners. Sometimes it seems that there's not always an understanding of what work is actually available in that local area specific to that.
Yeah.
Very different, say, in Glasgow than North Wales, where my constituency is, for example.
Yeah, that local place-based approach is crucial, understanding that local labour market. It's not a one-size-fits-all for all parts of the country. It's not a one-size-fits-all for every individual.
Great, and just to push a little on what you think could perhaps be done better. So we talked about there being a really good start, Jane, with the work that's going on with the Chambers of Commerce. Is there any kind of next steps that you could see in this work that we could start taking forward?
I think there's certainly opportunity for closer collaboration between DWP locally and Chambers of Commerce. I think more sharing of the data that LSIPs are providing, that all that data is there locally. It's rich, it's hyper-local, helping and training job centre staff to utilise that and understand that would be really important. I think there are lots of opportunities.
I feel, again, an open conversation with small businesses. In my 10 years in business and job centres walking distance from me, but we've never really had a conversation in terms of what my business might need. Maybe look at dedicated small business advisors and look at applicants that actually match job criteria to save small business owners time, because at the end of the day, we at small businesses, you don't have a dedicated person who deals with recruitment as you might do with the large business. So the business owner takes time out of running the business to go to the job centre. So understand that small businesses are completely different to big businesses, and time is of the essence, really. And also feedback mechanisms. If they do send us applicants, make sure that they take our feedback to know why it didn't work and how you might approach things differently the next time.
Greater partnership working in a nutshell between employers and job centres and making that match so it's actually got some longevity.
Yeah, and I think from the careers side of it as well, understanding, the realities of the modern manufacturing and the roles that are available and the different types of jobs that are available now. So more thorough understanding, again, using those local networks of, so that they can say and work with job seekers on what it's really going to be like and what the career, rather than a job, how do you progress in these jobs, getting into work and then being able to progress because you understand the opportunities.
Thank you. I could talk to you all day, but I'm conscious that I need to move on. So, apologies, Chair. Thank you so much.
Jo Baxter.
Thanks. I think that's really helpful in terms of better understanding the practicalities of the relationships on the ground. So just moving on from that then, in terms of your organisation's role as an employer stakeholder, more in terms of the policy development, what do you see as the right role for your organisations in terms of helping to shape and drive the reforms that we need to see in job centres?
I start, yeah, okay. So, as I said, we are place-based. Our role is to support businesses, to support local areas to thrive and grow, creating economic development, creating opportunities for individuals in those local communities. And we work with a broad range of local stakeholders, local authorities and other partners. That's what we do best, is engaging with businesses and representing businesses in that environment. So, we can whether or not we're providing a local skills improvement plan, we have the connections with employers, so we can we can make employers aware, we can get information out to employers, we can convene them, so and opportunities for job centre staff to speak to employers. I guess our role in that is really to support and help maybe broker that partnership and closer working. We wouldn't tend to know, the sorts of things that our employers are looking for in terms of, the preparedness for work, the sort of basic skills that, and team working, employability skills that businesses are looking for, and we can support employers, with understanding, potentially how to, if that job isn't a perfect match, signposting them to sources of help and support on how you can, change job design and carve out jobs, all of those things, supporting employers, on the sector-based work academies and all of those sorts of things. So I guess for us it's signposting, informing, convening businesses and convening businesses with other stakeholders to share that information.
I think FSB have had a fairly good few years working with the DWP in terms of policy making. We've been having a good conversation with the government. However, we feel as though these days a lot of the talk is around the Employment Rights Bill rather than getting people back into work. So maybe we want to bring the conversation back into getting people into work.
Is the DWP having sort of conversations about the reforms to job centres with either the FSB or with the chambers? To your knowledge, is there any engagement on that policy development side of things?
I probably didn't answer your
That's
question.
Okay, that's okay.
Yes, very much so. So we meet regularly with DWP policy staff, and have been doing for a long time in the labour market engagement group, where we talk about, shaping these policies, sort of nationally. So yeah, so there is good engagement, and yeah, we're very keen to continue that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. And look, it's been really interesting listening to you. For me, it's a bit of a case of back to the future. I worked on exactly these issues terrifyingly 27 years ago, and one of the really striking things is many of the same themes that came up then are coming in now. You're mentioning now. One of the big themes that was very current then was around the idea that the system needs to be more demand-led, so driven backwards, so to speak, from the needs of employers. Joanna's picked up the kind of role you play nationally in helping shape policy. I suppose the other side of being demand-led is the very tailored local responsiveness. From Jill's questions, we've heard about the kind of local capacity, but at that local level, where we're talking about the kind of local policy of what are people focusing on, what's the capacity, how do you feel employers are being engaged?
It tends to be that a representative of a chamber or other local business organisation will be involved with, the economic development forums, certainly with the local growth plans, with all of those sort of economic stakeholders. Businesses will have a voice around the table, so they will be involved very often through the chamber rep around those tables, discussing what's required and how we're going to deliver what's needed locally.
There's quite a big gap between that, which is a general how do you best engage business, and something sufficiently tailored that it helps in individual businesses and kind of makes it attractive. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's the next level, isn't it? Yeah. Once you've agreed on what's needed locally, the implementation then is the key bit. And again, chambers would be, and our representatives, our business representatives, would be really keen to be involved.
I think FSB would have to write a response to you in regards to that question, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Steve Darling.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming along today. It really is appreciated giving up your time for us. In the emerging new Jobs and Careers Service, you've already hinted at what you'd like to see prioritised, but can you just lay it out a bit more in black and white what you think the priorities should be for the new Jobs and Careers Service, please?
Do you want to go first? Yeah. I think I've said it before, but design a service around infrequent use employers, so that would be small businesses that don't use the job centres as often as big businesses do. Possibly look at schemes that have worked in the past, such as the Kickstart scheme. And also look into feedback mechanisms and more support available to the small businesses through possibly dedicated small business advisors.
Can you just unpack that a bit more? You talked about the Kickstart scheme. How did that work particularly well for you then, if that is a good example, or are there any others?
I think with the Kickstart scheme there was more of a demand from employers and less people available to do employees available. So I think it started off quite slowly and employers got into it, and as soon as we got into it, it stopped. So maybe relook at things that small business employees felt that worked.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree in terms of not a one-size-fits-all, so making sure the service, is supportive of the occasional use by a small business and the, more regular, more volume use of a larger firm. I think the key thing for us is better networking, better involvement of DWP job centres in that local business community. It's about raising awareness, building trust, understanding what the employer needs, and making sure that you treat the employer as the customer. I think that's the key thing that will bring employers back time and time again to use the service and create more opportunities for individuals coming through.
Thank you. And then the last bit I just wanted to touch on was how could you better work with the Department of Work and Pensions in respect of employing more diverse communities, whether it's people with a disability or people who may be neurodiverse? As employers, how could the DWP help you on that journey? I'm aware of some large employers who have entered that market quite deeply, but for small employers, I'm sure it's a bit more challenging, and I'd welcome your reflections on that, please.
Yes, so our research shows that around 2/3 of businesses don't have in place any specific initiatives for diverse workforces. So some larger firms will, but smaller firms don't have anything proactive in place in general to recruit, retain or train diverse workforces. It's not that they don't want to, they're very willing to, and they might tend to be doing it sort of naturally and organically rather than thinking of it as an initiative. And the barriers will be, as we said earlier, that lack of HR support, internal resource, a lack of confidence in how to do it, a fear of getting it wrong, fear of doing or saying the wrong thing, and the potential implications of that. So very willing to do it, but a fear of getting it wrong, and the reputational risk or the sort of disruption it might cause. So when we talk to businesses about this, they, as we said earlier, they're very happy to be making adjustments where they can in terms of flexible working and fitting in around individuals' needs, etc. But they will need help for that. Yep. So I think if a candidate is coming for an interview that does have sort of health or disability barriers potentially to work, so that the employer fully understands that and that they get support in making those adjustments. So, there's no lack of willingness to do this. Firms tell us time and time again they want to reach out and offer local opportunities to everybody, but it's about giving them the confidence to do so and having that wraparound support for the employer as well as the individual.
Do you have any reflections yourself?
I think just to follow on from what Jane said, I'm the employer that would be more than happy to take someone on. But like you said, it's that confidence that we don't have, and I feel as though I'd be more than happy, but the fear of getting something wrong and not doing everything by the book. So if we had a more usable, say for example, a job centre that offered us that support, we could go to them for advice.
Thank you. The other very brief one, Chair, if you'll indulge me, disability confident employer is something that the DWP run. Is it worth the paper it's written on for your organisations? Not that that's a loaded question.
we ran a workplace equity commission a year or so back, and we talked to employers who used the disability confidence scheme, and they were very, very supportive. I think the conclusion is it can do more, but it's a fantastic way of building confidence, of introducing employers to the opportunity, to getting them to think about how what can be done, and not looking at barriers, but looking at the art of the possible, and sort of shaping attitudes. And so I think it's a great scheme. Our members report that they're happy with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a few minutes, so I wonder if I might follow up on a couple of questions. So first of all, in terms of retention of people who, for example, who may become sick or disabled, you probably heard from the previous panel the important and the metaphor around the plug in the bath. So how do you get support from DWP and the job centres currently around what you could do to ensure we retain workers, as I say, who may become sick or disabled? That's my first question. If you haven't got any specific answers around this, that's absolutely fine. If you could write to us, that would be wonderful. But if you have anything that you'd like to say now.
I think there's something around. Sorry, were you?
Sorry, no. I was going to say I've no experience of it. So
Okay. So in terms of access to work, lots of employers who've used that have said, great service, needs more resourcing. It can take us a while to, once we get what we need, it's great. It's just, it can take a little while to get an appointment and take a little while to get things sorted. So very positive from that perspective. I think it's worth saying as well, that businesses at the moment are talking a lot about workplace health and the importance of keeping people in work who are, experiencing, health difficulties or become disabled for whatever reason. Employers want to do that because they've invested in their skills. They've got relationships with those individuals, good relationships. They want to hang on to those people. So employers are looking for ways to prevent people from falling out of work. That is a massive priority for us. I can write to you with some of the ideas that we have for that.
Thank you. And could I also ask, in terms of, obviously we've been focusing on job centres at the moment, but with the Get Britain Working white paper, the proposals are around merging the career service with that. So what engagement do employers currently have with the career service? I think I was struck by the point that you made, Saira, about you've engaged more with your local university to recruit. So what sort of engagement have you had with career services?
I think we ourselves as a small businesses contact the university directly and say, look, this is the job that we've got available, so an architectural job or a planning job. We find ourselves contacting universities and colleges directly where we've got T-levels and apprentices and degree graduates. We don't really have anyone in between sort of working with us to say, we'll find you someone locally. So I think that's a bit of a struggle for us because we've got to go out there and find the right people within these universities and colleges.
So do you tend to use the job centre then for entry-level jobs?
Yeah, jobs like admin, customer service, that sort of thing. Yeah.
All right. And if I may ask you the same in terms of the involvement with the career service?
Less so nationally, but chambers on the ground would have a good working relationship, I think, with the National Careers Service through the local skills improvement plans.
Okay.
At the moment, we think it is a really good idea to, what the reforms are proposing to do is to bring those two together. It makes good sense.
Lovely. Thank you. Well, that's all the questions that we have for you for this panel. Thank you so much. It's been really, really nice. And do, if you have some more information that you'd like to share with us, please do get in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you. To our third panel for this first oral evidence session for the Reforming Jobcentres inquiry. Would you like to introduce yourselves, starting Ben?
Yeah, I'm Elizabeth Taylor. I'm the Chief Executive of the Employment Related Services Association.
Long title.
And we call ourselves ERSA, so let's stick with that.
Absolutely. And a very glamorous name, by the way.
It is. I know, I have to live with it. So, we represent organisations that deliver employment support. We represent the organisations who work alongside the job centre, and they can be large private organisations, third sector, local authorities, a chamber of commerce is even in membership, mostly third sector, and delivering some DWP contracts, the big national provisions, but lots of small, specialist, health-related, sector-focused, youth-focused, older workers-focused, the whole gamut. And we work really closely alongside work coaches and colleagues in Jobcentres Plus.
Thank you. And Ramesh.
Hello, good morning. My name is Ramesh Moher. I'm the director of an organisation called New Challenge. We're a small community interest company. We're based in Brent, but we deliver various contracts around London. A primary contract is the National Careers Service, but we also deliver adult skills funded courses through the Greater London Authority and also a community outreach programme. And in terms of our experience, we've worked on National Career Service since its inception in 2012. It's gone through various different contract changes over that time, and before that we actually worked on the Next Step contract as well, which was a very different beast.
Thank you. And first question goes to Frank McNally.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. We're still in the morning. Good morning to you both. And I'm grateful to yourself, Elizabeth, and Ramesh for outlining some of the relationships that you currently have with Jobcentres Plus. And I suppose the first question is kind of unpacking that a little further, because the committee is keen to get a sense of the effectiveness of the work and engagement that your members have with Jobcentres Plus. So maybe, Elizabeth, if I can ask yourself about that experience and engagement with Jobcentres Plus. Is there anything that you would say works particularly well? Are there particular challenges that you think we need to take into consideration as we're exploring this area further? And I suppose finally, how does that vary across your members? The experience might be different from sector to sector or whatever. So could you maybe give us a bit more information about that relationship?
So I think first of all I'd say that the employment support sector organisations support the work of Jobcentres Plus. Some organisations will be delivering national provisions like Restart, a work and health programme. I say national, they're not in 4 nations, but in England and Wales. Those relationships are based on referrals from Jobcentres Plus, usually with trigger points where somebody is sort of run out of weeks of working with the Jobcentre Plus work coach and then moves on to something like Restart. It's not always clear how long somebody's been unemployed because it will be based on how long they've claimed universal credit. So there's a kind of a journey that goes through job centres and out to what I call outsourced provision. I think those relationships work really well, but there are lots of problems in it. I think we heard earlier today how large some of those work coaches' caseloads are. Often when you're working with an individual and if you want a point of reference back to the work coach, it's not the same work coach and people don't always know, always have those relationships. I think there's a lack of recognition that the sector pick up the people that haven't got a good service or got to a good outcome with the job centre. So, but they are good relationships within the confines of people being referred, mandated, the conditionality, the expectation about going on provision. And then there are other provisions that are voluntary or provisions that are funded outside that main Department of Work and Pensions funding source, whether the health, shared prosperity, in the old days ESF, funded through local authorities, some of the devolved contracts. That is a different relationship with the job centre, but there is still that interaction because you're still working with the claimant, and the Jobcentre Plus have that responsibility for, claimant commitment or whatever. I think what is really lacking is putting the individual at the centre of it. And there always seems to be a line where somebody goes from having a Jobcentre Plus work coach out onto a provision, and the relationship gets pushed down the road. And you don't talk about Charlie. You don't ring up and talk about Charlie anymore because he's suddenly your client. I think since the work programme, it's been a competitive environment where the sector was asked to demonstrate how we performed better than the job centre, and that's not always healthy when you want to put the individual first and get them into good work, the right job. It shouldn't be a competition, it should be a sort of journey for that individual. And I think the other thing is there are lots and lots of small specialist providers who are in job centres all day, every day, supporting the work of work coaches, and that often gets unrecognised. And Jobcentre Plus work coaches may get somebody into work, and the actual resource that's been put into them may have come from an organisation that's working with women, an organisation that's helping with childcare, an organisation with transport solutions, or the access to work provider, or the NCS provider. It's not always recognised, and it shouldn't be an either or. And one of the things that I feel really strongly about Jobcentre Plus reform is it can't and it won't happen without the employment support sector and a recognition of how we need to work alongside each other, and it has to be that sort of rich tapestry. And I think that's what we bring in what is often a difficult circumstance.
It's more effective transparency and more effective partnership.
Partnership, I'd say.
Okay. Ramesh, if I can maybe just come to you, as a smaller organisation, you've heard Elizabeth's comments here. Do you have anything that you want to add from your perspective, how that maybe differs as a sort of smaller organisation, both again in terms of the weaknesses and strengths?
Sure. Yeah, so in terms of our experience, and I think that one of the things that shouldn't get lost here is that I think about 60% of people who come to National Careers Service would be directed through DWP. It's a piece of research I looked at, which means about 40% come through different avenues as well, so it's really important to bear that in mind as well. But in terms of our day-to-day activities in the job centre, yes, we are one of those organisations that have got careers advisors in job centres full-time, Monday to Friday, supporting, sitting alongside the work coaches and supporting their customers with their careers. in terms of the kind of practicalities and challenges, it's like everything else. Some things work well. In terms of individual work coaches, some of them are fantastic and really engaged and will make the referrals. Others less so. So there is, I would say, inconsistent engagement across the board. I think one of the other things we've come up against really throughout the whole period from 2012 is the NCS is seen as a CV writing service. That's almost the mindset of DWP. That's what they want, and that's what the NCS will be. Although what they don't then fully gain and understand, I think, is the full gamut and range of different skills and experience that a careers advisor can bring, and they do bring. So in terms of using the whole array of career tools at their disposal, I think colleagues talked earlier on today about the knowledge they have, so labour market information, labour market intelligence they would have. So we're very much engaged with all sorts of different provision out there. So it could be referring people to skills boot camps, it could be to adult skills funded provision, it could be to UK SPF youth provision, NEET provision, etc., etc. So they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of tools at their disposal. But I don't think that's always appreciated by job centre staff, because what they want in the here and now is a CV. One of the other key things for us is that we find that we're seeing customers coming to us who seem to have been lost in the system. So they're coming to us and we find that they may have been unemployed for many years. They still have ESOL issues. They still have low digital skills. The question is, why is that allowed to happen? So I think one of the things where we can work closer together, and this is what I would say, would be to kind of go in and do early triage from, week 1, week 2. What are the barriers there? Let's address those straight away, rather than leaving them for years on end and ending up with a situation where individuals' confidence and motivation has completely disappeared, and it makes everybody's job far harder.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill German.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for attending, and also for your written evidence that both of you have put in. It's been incredibly helpful. I just wanted to ask a little bit about a term that you use in your written evidence, Elizabeth, about a job centre plus centric understanding of employment support. So I'm really interested in this term, what you mean by that, and also what the impact's been on how we're running things currently, and then from that how we can do better.
Okay. This was really gathered from evidence that ERSA members provided in writing our submission, but something that's been known and said for years. I think it comes from that culture of it's the same organisation that's managing benefits, it's the same organisation that is making people justify and prove their eligibility for benefits, and that, I believe in conditionality. I believe you should be actively looking for work or whatever, but it sort of drives some perverse behaviours sometimes. And then we've had that experience of people being forced to take any job with an assumption that if you took any job, you'd get a better job and it'd lead to a career. And we've learnt that it hasn't. And not only have we learnt that it hasn't within the sector's experience, but there's organisations like the Work Foundation who've done research that have proved that getting any job leaves you stuck in low-paid work. So I think there are that sort of, when we use that term, what we are sort of saying is that within the job centres, benefits drives the culture. The whole thing of you can only go there if you've got an appointment, the security guards on the door, it's not a welcoming environment. People only go there because they want to receive their benefits. I'm sure there's exceptions, yeah. I think it works really well for people who have just come out of work and need to get back into work quick. But it's not, it doesn't put that individual with all their complexities, the childcare needs, the care responsibilities, the whatever, at the focus of it. It's all about just into a job, and it doesn't work.
Ramesh, that seems to touch on your comment about a CV writing service, so that the NCS is very much seen as a means to an end to get people through the system. Would that be your take?
Yeah, quite quickly. I think that's the objective, is to move them on as quickly as possible, but I don't think that works. I think the whole idea of, a job, any job, a good job, a career, doesn't necessarily work. I think what you end up then is a revolving door situation where you're getting those people back fairly quickly after maybe a short-term contract or some other short-term opportunity, and they come back because really they haven't been given that scope to build their careers as a result of that.
Would it be safe to say that that you welcome a move away from that work first ethos that is coming through from the white paper that the government's put forward?
I think as a sort of trade body of employment support organisations, we did a piece of work 2 years ago, and we really embraced the good work agenda. We think people getting the right job and a good job keeps them in work, and longer term is a return on that investment for the taxpayer of giving them a little bit longer to get a job, so in order to get the right job. And if you want to attract people back into the labour market, and we've got the big challenge of economic inactivity, we've got the challenge of 1 million young people that are neat. They need to see that they can get the job they want. They need to see that as a positive future rather than something punitive, which is the perception that some of them have that they're going to be made to do now. And it doesn't take much longer, and it doesn't take much more money. It just takes a different approach. And I think that's where we need to get to.
And there are those opportunities out there in terms of the skills that are then coupled with employers offering opportunities at the end of the day, like the skills boot camps would be an example, or the skills academies across London as well, which have been quite successful across different sectors.
That leads me on nicely to, so the obvious question after that is, what would a non-job centre plus centric model look like? So I think that kind of touches on that already, and using those external organisations that you represent, Elizabeth, to get through that very complicated journey from long-time unemployment back into work that exists. So what would you love to see at the end of this journey?
I think what I'd like to see is within the new job centres, because we really embrace this idea. We think it's a really good idea, but the work coaches in those job centres can't do everything, and I think we've got to recognise that. I think that, so in the future, I think you need to have more employment support providers in there. You need to have more community-based organisations in there. All the job centres co-locating with those organisations. I think because work coaches at the moment focus on benefits and quick into work, they don't always have within their toolbox, and this isn't a criticism of the individuals, but it's people have complex barriers, and we need to have those sort of in-house resources and partner resources to work on the wider issues that parents face, that carers face, that people who've had difficult personal circumstances around domestic violence, say, or are prison leavers, or are doing community-based custodial sentences. This is the reality of people not in work, and having people who you can draw upon to have different relationships and different conversations with has got to be there in job centres of the future. And for them to be open door, for people to be able to just turn up and not be challenged by the security guard about what time your appointment is, because that's what happens now.
And with regards to the career service, where would you see that fitting into a new model of how to do things?
I think, again, from our direct experience, what's happened is it's been, we feel very much it's an undervalued service, so it's been underfunded, like many aspects of many services, I guess. But certainly from our perspective, we're allowed to do one funded session per individual per 12-month period. Anything beyond that isn't funded, and the funding is very, very small, challenging. What we would like to see is a bit more of a journey really with the customer. So if they need one support session, absolutely fine. There might be those who are closer to the labour market who might just need a tweak on their CV or just a bit of support around what the opportunities are locally. But there are others that, you know, do then embark on a longer journey, and I think it'd be really useful to have the ability to provide them with 2-3 sessions over a 12-month period, which was more akin to the next step model. We are also very much, you know, I'll give you a direct example now. So as of today, we don't know if we have any funding from the 1st of April because the Prime has been told by DfE that it's imminent. But from a small business perspective, you know, in terms of the supply chain for London, there's one Prime, there are 11 partners or subcontractors, and they're a real mix. There are colleges there are private companies there are third sector organisations like ourselves. So we don't even know as of today whether we'll have staffing, funding to pay for staffing as of the 1st of April. I'm hoping it comes through, but we don't know. And, you know, when you're treated like that, you do have that sense of being undervalued really, because you're thinking, well, you know, where's the commitment to this? So coming back to the question, I think it's more of, you know, a little bit more funding. It's not an expensive service, but if we can support people who need more interventions over a period of time, that would be better rather than the kind of one session.
Tick in the box.
Tick in the box, yeah.
Thank you so much.
You darling.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank you both for the work that you do with organisation, you know, with people in our communities, because I know from organisations like Eat That Frog or Sound Communities in my community of Torbay, what a real difference you make to people's lives, and it genuinely is life-changing. And Ramesh, in your written evidence, you talked about people being recycled through the system. Can you paint that picture a little bit more? I think you've already given some allusion to it, but some building that a little bit more. Then the other area that I'd really welcome both of you exploring is what if you dare to imagine that the government actually invested more in the third sector and disinfected, sorry, Freudian slip there, disinvested in the DWP and front-loaded investment in the third sector, what could that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of the funding side of things, maybe do you want me to take them in order? Come back to your first one? Or?
Yeah, and then
yeah. So in terms of revolving door, yeah, I mean that is something we see on a day-to-day basis, and that's not just in job centres, but also in organisations where we're working out in the community, where we might be providing National Career Service support to individuals there. It's quite common to come across, and it could well, and I guess there's a lot of variation, obviously, geographically across the country. We're based in Brent, but also we have we work with partners in East London as well, where you've got, you know, large communities of people who may not have English as a first language. But yeah, people who might have been unemployed for many, many years, and they come to a career service and they're really struggling with their spoken English, with their literacy, and that we feel can't be right. So something is going wrong at the start. Why isn't this being picked up really early? Why isn't it being addressed from day one? Because really there should be enough provision out there in terms of you know, colleges, community-based organisations that are delivering, for example, ESOL provision. And equally, there's also a big problem with digital skills as well. So even though we're moving towards, you know, obviously with all the changes that are going on, there's a real danger that people are going to be left behind because they haven't got the digital skills. And again, we find that inexcusable. There is provision out there. There's plenty of provision across London, where, you know, funded through the GLA and other pots. Why isn't that being addressed? So that is one thing. And I think in terms of the second question, it kind of leads on. Well, I think if we are given a little bit more funding, then we can do more. and we can really be a lot more proactive in terms of what we're able to do in terms of engaging more over a sustained period of time for those who need it most. So I think that would be quite liberating in terms of that.
Thank you.
I think, shall I take the revolving door first? Yeah. I think that people often do cycle through different support provisions, and I think it's because we don't get it right in the first place. And so that's not a criticism of anything if they've had an NCS intervention or whatever, because as Ramesh has said, you know, that's it for the year. So often people go through these trigger points where, you know, you've been unemployed for 9 months, so you go on this provision, and then you've been employed and you go on that provision. And there are people who break that cycle. And I think there's really good examples in the employment support sector of breaking that cycle. But it's not a perfect environment, yeah. And yesterday I was at an organisation called St Giles Trust in Southwark, and 45% of people who use their services self-refer, and most of those self-referrals move into work that they stay in because it's not because it's a different environment, and it links in with talking about what do you want your future to look like. What skills do you need to get there? What support do you need? How do we sort out your transport? How do we access other things? It's a different conversation, and it's those conversations that break that cycle. And then in terms of the other part of your question, which was about the DWP and the third sector, I think the DWP are really good at the benefit process. We saw how well they stepped up in the COVID pandemic to processing new claims and all the rest of it. They're really good for that first 12, 13 weeks with a claim, with people who are ready to move into work. But if people have come back onto their caseload because they've shifted from a legacy benefit to universal credit or whatever, they just seem to stay in the system until they get out and they get to employment support provision. So it is about the third sector, but it's not just about the third sector. I think it's the more community-based, partnership-based, with a really good range of specialists within organisations or other community partners. That's when you break those cycles. And yeah, DWP of the future for me would be doing the benefits, doing the first weeks of a claim, and then engaging partners. And that's what I think Jobcentre Plus reform should look like. Whether we get there or not, I don't know.
Thank you, that's really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. John Mill.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and just to say, Ramesh, that's a remarkable fact that you're not sure of your funding past April 1, which is not very far away. But anyway, so obviously, we're looking at the possible merger of Jobcentre Plus and National Careers Service. It's a big change, big organisational change. There's always pros and cons. What do you see as the risks of this merger, Ramesh? If you want to go first.
Well, I think it kind of firstly going back to my first point was the National Careers Service is quite a complicated model. So you've got the different regions, you've got primes in all of those regions, you've got quite complex supply, well not complex, but a number of organisations on the supply chains that might be colleges, might be third sector organisations, might be third sector organisations, private sector organisations, and it's complicated. So, and I think a lot of the discussion, so a lot of things happen when there's an information vacuum. So we're being constantly told by the job centre staff what's happening, and we're saying, well, we don't know, what's going on with the merger. So in terms of the merger, there's a lot of discussion around that, and that causes uncertainty. That's just one point that I wanted to pick up on. Sorry, what was the second point on that?
Well, it's the risks of it.
Yeah, so the risks are a demotivated workforce. It's also not necessarily recognising the skill sets, the different skill sets that are currently there. So, for example, with National Career Service, all the advisors are level 4 qualified minimum to be able to work on the contract. So these are fairly expensive qualifications that are funded by the organisations delivering the contract. But more than that, it's a lot of time invested in professional development. So some of these qualifications can be up to 280 hours guided learning hours, 450 hours of their time in total to get the qualification. So there's a lot of knowledge and skills there that come through that. And also, it's not just about careers advice, it's also there are career theories elements that are covered by the professionals delivering National Career Service. So there is an element of coaching, putting your arm around someone and saying, you can do this. It's motivational interviewing techniques. Whereas with you are potentially at risk of losing that. Whereas against the work coaches who are more, we see, yes, they might do a little bit of initial job search, but fundamentally it's about making sure their customers are meeting their conditionality in terms of ensuring they get their benefits, and also, as someone alluded to earlier, huge caseloads, and only maybe 10 minutes, and what we see, 7 minutes, 10 minutes with a customer. What can you do in terms of careers advice or job brokerage in that time? Very, very little.
Short career perhaps, yes.
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
I think I feel duty bound to say that it's not just NCS that have got funding uncertainty. The Shared Prosperity Fund has never delivered at the scale of the European Social Fund. 24 of the local authorities didn't put people and skills in their SPF investment plans. Those that did have got a 60% cut. It's not always a 60% cut on people and skills, it's across that SPF. So we're seeing that depleted. We're seeing organisations make people redundant. We've seen the tail off of the work and health programme, which stopped taking referrals last September. We're losing experience and expertise out of the sector every day at the moment. And I think it's really hard to get it back. And these are the individuals in the organisations that we actually need to get Britain working, and that we need for Jobcentre Plus transformation as well. So I'm really pleased to be here today, but I just think there's some urgency in getting to the end of this conversation and actually knowing what is on the other side of it, because there's a proven case that investment in employment support has a return on investment, and we need to start moving on to that point soon.
And do you think that a job centre is the right or optimal place to to deliver career support, employment support in principle?
I think it's questionable for many of the reasons that have been picked up earlier. So I think they can feel quite a threatening environment. I've been to job centres where you're met by a wall of security people there. Can be quite intimidating for some people. A lot of the discussions occur in open plan, so there might be confidentiality issues around that. We've never really been given separate space where we're allowed to, undertake those career interviews, and there might be quite sensitive issues that might be coming up during those conversations. I think, I think for those reasons, and also the fabric of the building, sometimes, if someone's going into a building that looks quite tired and in need of investment, that might also reflect on the person's belief in themselves in terms of, I'm kind of not worthy of this. So it's really a mixture of those things. So I think not always. I think they could be. I think in terms of the network of job centres around the country and the communities that they reach, that's a good thing, although there have been quite a few job centre closures over a period of time where you've then had less National Career Service that's closer to individuals who might need that. But as I say, I think there's something like 35 to 40% of individuals are seen outside of job centres, so they might be seen in a college, a third sector organisation like St Giles, for example. We've actually done years ago some work with them. So I think it would need to be looked at potentially, but I think not in the way the current model is set up, certainly not the environment.
I would say I absolutely agree with the environment. It's difficult to get through that door. But also, the estate of job centres has reduced over years, so people are have to travel to get there. The footprint of not every UK town has a job centre. People don't always realise that. When employment support provision is delivered, there's an expectation that we'll set up centres, we'll find co-location, so it's easier to access employment support outside of a job centre than it is just because of the physical locations of places. I think also, I think it was said in one of the earlier evidence sessions that you can't take your child with you. You couldn't take your elderly parent that you're about to take to a medical appointment afterwards with you. You know, it's very rigid and time-bound, and then you're out the door, you know, and I just think they're not easy to access and they're not easy to get over the threshold of, and they've declined over the last few years, and people are behind screens, and I know that happened with, you know, for health issues of the pandemic, but they were there before and they've not been taken down, and it's a strange environment. And
being a careers advisor and being a work coach, it's a different skill, requires a different approach. How would you describe those different approaches? And again, do you think they can be successfully combined within the same place?
As I said earlier, I think they're a very, very different skill set. You know, in terms of the work coaches, what we see is that there's a lot of administration, benefits administration. The interviews are with individuals are quite short, and it's really about conditionality. What have you done in the last fortnight? Show me what you've done. What are you going to do? And that's pretty much it. It's quite short. Whereas careers advisors, as I say, they've got those foundational qualifications. The service has been professionalised over the years. And the advisors can, you know, I do believe they've got a completely different skill set in terms of looking at a longer term picture as well. Yes, sometimes it can be short term, it depends on the individual circumstances, but it's also not a one size fits all. It's very much looking at what the needs are, and so, in some cases it might be, like I say, a few tweaks here and there to a CV, but in other cases it might take a lot more steps for the individual that's being supported to become closer to the workforce, and often there's a skills gap that needs to be addressed, and that's where the careers advisors will be able to look at that, analyse it, evaluate it, and make some recommendations based on that.
If I could just add, I think the work coaches can be expected to do too much, and if they become that kind of, I can't remember what the expression is, jack of all trades, then you're master of none or whatever, yeah, but they are really good at the benefits processing, they're really good at the people close to the labour market getting into work, but they're expected to do other things. They're expected now, you know, to be self-employment advisors. That's very specialist. It shouldn't be put in a work coach brief. I don't think careers advice should be put in that. So I think there's going to have to be investment in training specialisms within the new job centres, and that's where, why not use the partners that are in those communities who have those specialisms to come in and deliver. You don't need to kind of completely reinvent this. You just need to change the culture.
You just need to pick up a bit of pace, John, please.
Yep. Well, finally, a question I asked the previous panel. How should the government measure success and therefore in effect set targets?
I think it's inevitable that we want to see people in work. That's what everybody's here for, whether it's the job centre, employment support, yeah. But I think there needs to be some recognition of some of the barriers that get broken down. So closely aligning employment support with skills would be a better future, so that you're preparing people for work and that gets recognised. Not just getting people into any job, but getting people into a job where they progress and recognising that in work progression, and better relationships with employers, so that if somebody's in work and they progress, the relationships there that you backfill and you keep those, you know, you keep people moving. Those are the things that should be measured in the future. There have been in the past things like ESF programmes where there were lots of soft outcomes and outputs. I think in the end those softer ones did lead to the harder job outcome, job retention ones, so we shouldn't dismiss them as being soft because they're part of a journey.
So in terms of the National Career Service at the moment, there's quite a heavy emphasis on tracking and outcomes. So just very quickly, from a funding perspective, we're funded for that one session per individual over those 12 months. And then we're funded for outcomes, be it a learning outcome or a job outcome. The job outcomes, the measures used by DfE at the moment are 4 weeks sustained, 16 hours continuous over those 4 weeks. And a learning outcome would be accredited learning, so it would be the qualification would have to be on the Ofqual register. So those are the ones that the metrics that we work to at the moment. But I think, obviously, I think it's key that we're looking at employment, the rates of employment. We want to get people back into work. But what's the quality of that work? Is it sustained? So measures over 13 weeks, 6 months are really useful. But also looking at, for example, in London, are they meeting the London living wage, for example, would be quite an important consideration. But for those who sit before that and need that journey to get to that point of being able to go into work, I think there are some of the things that I don't think are being measured at the moment are people's ESOL or literacy and numeracy and digital skills. So as part of some process, we need to see, have you got the skill set? Are you ready? And are we addressing those barriers? And those could be measured, couldn't they? So in terms of digital skills, do some basic assessments to find out that people have got the ability to use tech to help enable them. Other things would be around CV. Is their CV fit for purpose? Is it ready to go? And some of the softer skills elements that Liz was just talking about there, I think are really, really important around confidence and motivation, because those are the things you need as foundations before you can move on into work.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious.
Thank you. Very briefly from David.
Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to start by saying you brought a smile to my face today because I was for many years a trustee of the St Giles Trust. And so it's fantastic to hear that their good work continues. I suppose just one very brief question, because unfortunately we are out of time. So obviously I heard a lot about intermediaries, and at one level it's fantastic. At another level, I have to say we've been having this conversation for 25 years. And so it is striking and, well, not depressing, but remind me how far we still have to go. The thing I'd like to touch on is the point you raised, Elizabeth, advancement. So we haven't talked really at all in these sessions about advancement. The government's talked about using advancement as a key part of the offer. Clearly we know from the way poverty works and the low wage labour market works that you need to get advancement, otherwise people just stagnate and they have a kind of low pay, no pay cycle that they get trapped in. We also know that IAG on its own and a bit of CV help doesn't really do anything for advancement. What will the merger need to accomplish so that it can actually provide advancement support rather than just a sticking plaster?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is skills. So in terms of what we can do at the moment, as I said, it's quite limited. But if there were the potential to have funding for more sessions over a period of time, you kind of, and if it could be with the same careers advisor, if that's feasible, obviously if people move out of area, that's a different matter. But if they could have that relationship where they look at that journey really and look at skills gaps. So, I'm going into this job, okay, it's not ideal, but what can I do in terms of skills to address that? And improve my career trajectory. So I think having something that's a model that's a little bit more sustainable from a career perspective would be really useful, because it's, rather than just that one intervention, it's again more of a journey with that individual and helping them make the advancement that you talk about.
And I'd just like to add that when we look at that kind of progression in work, it's different for each individual. Everybody will want to earn more money, and maybe financial has to be the goal, but financial shouldn't always be driven by working more hours, because that can be difficult for parents, people with care responsibilities. So actually being able to move to better jobs that are better remunerated is a real goal for people, and that's where skills comes in. And for actually creating that environment of good work where people have job satisfaction so they stay in work and their health's good and their well-being's good, I think is what we should really be aiming for. And we should have the opportunity to do those things now.
Thank you so much. I've got one question, but if it's possible, could you write to me with a response? Unfortunately, we've run over. And it's about AI and digital skills. So you mentioned, I think, Ramesh, about the importance of person-centred approach. So what's the balance between the use of AI and digital and more person-centred approach? And then finally, in terms of the use of AI and digital, how can we make sure that we mitigate against risks around that as well? Thank you so much. It's been incredibly informative, but I'm going to close today's session.